of a baby, what actually happens. Yeah.
Athletic program at school, we have to do like um, one lesson and then we're done. And it just teaches reading and math. And the reading, when I was doing the reading comprehension, uh, they gave a book about dogs and how the dog should be off leash from 6 a.m. to 9 a.m.
Off
How,
leash.
yeah,
Okay.
off leash, which means like they can,
Okay.
and uh,
And 6
they
a.m.
also
to
say
9 a.m. or 9
6
p.m. Okay.
the dogs the book said it's good for the dogs and the owners. And uh, I couldn't understand. So is that wrong? That it's good for the dogs and the owners?
I don't know. I never had a dog. I only have cows. Uh,
Maharaj, my brother was saying, uh, is it bad to have a cat? So I was just wondering.
Cats and dogs, they're very low class births. Well, uh, best thing is to have a little calf, a little like Ram does.
Bad to have a cat. Bad
Well, those are very, cats and dogs are very low class births. So it's better to avoid them. Yeah. And people think, calf or a dog or a cat, they're like, wonderful pets, but
yeah.
actually they're not such wonderful. And you see, the poop of the cat and the dog are contaminating, and the urine also. But the poop and the urine of the cow is always purifying. Right. So you see, there's a major difference between the cat and dog as compared to the cow. So why get involved with the cow the cat and the dog when their poop and their pee is going to be uh, uh, you know uh, it's going to be uh, contaminating things in the house. Normally, before people never kept a cat and dog in the house. Right? Nowadays, they keep the cat and the dog in the house, so it means the house is really contaminated also
Dog house, house,
outside. Yeah,
backyard is
yeah. Well, that's a little better, but it's better just to stay away from cats and dogs. Okay, so we were reading about how the living entity is born, and we didn't finish this. So
We were on verse
20,
no 13.
verse 13.
12 we completed. 13.
Okay, here. Verse, we're on 14.
No, we have to start with 13.
Okay, if I can find that. Okay, 13 says, translation, I, the pure soul, appearing now, bound by my activities, am lying in the womb of my mother. by the arrangement of Maya. I offer my respectful obeisance unto him. He's talking about Krishna now, who is also here with me, but who is unaffected and changeless. He is unlimited, but he is perceived in the repentant heart. To him, I offer my respectful obeisances. So, when you're suffering, uh, you become some people who are not atheists. They start talking about God, and therefore here it says, but he, meaning God or Krishna, is unlimited, but he is perceived in the repentant heart. So the heart of a person who is praying to Krishna to forgive his sins. That's what repentant means. And it says, to him, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, I offer my respectful obeisances. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. As stated in the previous verse, the Jiva soul says, I take shelter of the Supreme Lord. Therefore, constitutionally, the Jiva soul is the subordinate servitor of the Supreme Soul, the personality of Godhead. Both the Supreme Soul and the Jiva soul are sitting in the same body as confirmed in the Upanishads. They are sitting as friends, but one is suffering and the other is aloof from suffering. In this verse, it is said, Visudam avikaram akandabodham. The super soul is always sitting apart from all contamination. The living entity is contaminated and suffering because he has a material body. But that does not mean that because the Lord is also with him, he also has a material body. He is avikaram, changeless. He is always the same supreme. But unfortunately, the Mayavadi, one second, just see where we are. The Mayavadi philosophers, because of their impure hearts, cannot understand that the supreme soul, the super soul, is different from the individual soul. It is said here, Atap Yamana Hirdaye Vasitam. Here is in the heart, is in the heart of every living entity, but he can be realized only by a soul who is repentant. Well, repentant means, let's look that word up, repentant. Repentant means he's feeling sorry for any, for the, let's say, the mistakes they've made in life, or sinful things that they've done. Yeah, what does it say?
Expressing a feeling of sincere regret or remorse.
Yes. The individual soul becomes repentant that he forgot his constitutional position, wanted to become one with the Supreme Soul, and tried his best to lord it over material nature. He has been baffled, and therefore he is repentant. At that time, super soul, or the relationship between the super soul and the individual soul, is realized. As it is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita, after many, many births, the knowledge comes to the conditioned soul that Vasudeva is great. He is master and he is Lord. The individual soul is the servant, and therefore he surrenders unto him, or Krishna. At that time, he becomes a Mahatma, a great soul. Therefore, a fortunate living being who comes to this understanding, even within the womb of his mother, has his liberation assured. So it says, even in the womb of the mother, that means that there's prenatal consciousness. One can also be educated while still in the womb. That's what happened to Prahlad Maharaj. When he was born, he was only 5 years old. He was a devotee, and his father, couldn't understand it. How did he become a devotee? Well, at one time, the um, uh, the demigods were wanted to kidnap uh, uh, Hiranyakashipu's wife, and because they knew that she was pregnant, and they wanted to kill her and the baby in her womb, and uh, the she was rescued by Narada and taken to his ashram and protected her, and was always chanting Hare Krishna and explaining you know uh, spiritual knowledge, and that way the baby in the womb of the mother became educated in Krishna consciousness. So as soon as he was born, he was already a devotee and already knew everything about Krishna. And the father, Hiranyakashipu, was the demon. He was shocked because he tried to send Prahlad to the school of demons. Just like today we have all these demon schools called, high school, middle school, and so forth, and demon teachers. And Prahlad was not interested. His father put him in a demon school. He wasn't interested at all uh, because he had already been trained in Krishna consciousness. So there is such a thing as prenatal consciousness that the and not just the embryo, but when after the seventh month in the womb of the mother, the child is fully grown, and when I say fully grown, it's fully conscious, and can be educated still in the womb of the mother. So Prahlad was born already trained and already cognizant of his relationship with Krishna. And this really perplexed Hiranyakashipu. He couldn't understand, how did this boy learn all these things. And he thought his demon teachers had taught them, and they said, "No, we didn't teach him any of that. It just seems that he's just naturally a devotee." So then Hiranyakashipu wanted to kill Prahlad, and he tried to kill him in many ways, but it never succeeded because Prahlad was always protected by the Lord. So then uh, Hiranyakashipu, being a demon, he said, "Okay, well, maybe my son is some kind of mystic yogi or something. I can't seem to be able to kill him. So maybe I'll just kill his god." So he asked Prahlad, he said, where is your God? Prahlad said, "Well, he's everywhere." So Hiranyakashipu said, "Well, is it in this column? There's like 1,000 columns in his palace." And Prahlad said, "Yes, he's everywhere." So Hiranyakashipu, takes his sword and breaks the column, and out comes this Shringadev, you know, something, a living entity that he couldn't imagine existed, because it's half lion, half human. And then the Shringadev, because Hiranyakashipu was always trying to kill Prahlad, he grabs the demon, puts him on his lap, and eviscerates him. That's a nice word, eviscerates. You can look that up. He rips open his gut and takes out his intestines and puts it around his neck like a garland. And Prahlad's just standing there watching all this. He's not at all surprised or afraid or anything like that. Everybody else is afraid, but he's not, because he recognizes the Lord. And eventually, Prahlad's mother and others, they ask him, "You give him a garland so he calms down." This Srinivas was really upset that Prahlad was being harassed. And Prahlad takes the garland and puts it on the Lord. And eventually the Lord calms down. Right? And he says to Prahlad, Prahlad, I'm so very, very pleased by you. Ask me for any benediction. And Prahlad said, "Oh no, please don't tempt me. Uh, by saying any benediction. I'm just satisfied, chanting your names and being your servant. So, and then the Sringadev says, look, Prahlad, you have to take some blessing. So Prahlad says, okay, if you want to give me one blessing, please bring my father back and save him. Huh? Yeah. So here you see, although the father was trying to kill Prahlad, Prahlad is very merciful because he's a real devotee. So, but then the Sringadev tells him, well, your father, because you're a devotee, your father and 14 generations of your family have already been, blessed, and they're going to go back to Godhead. So, uh, all right. So now we're on this text, I guess 13. Huh?
13 is completed.
No, it's from this.
Yeah, we just finished 13.
Oh, we just finished 13. Okay, so we're on 14. Let me see. All right. So it says, I am separated from the Supreme Lord. And this is, I guess, the living entity in the womb of the mother. I am separated from the Supreme Lord because of my being in this material body.
Just one, I think you said 14 generations. It's actually 21 generations.
Okay, 21 generations. Okay, good. Huh? Even better, yeah. I am separated from the Supreme Lord because of my being in this material body, which is made of 5 elements, and therefore my qualities and senses are being misused. Although I am essentially spiritual, because the Supreme Personality of Godhead is transcendental to material nature and the living entities, because he is devoid of such a material body, and because he is always glorious in his spiritual qualities, I offer my obeisances unto him. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The difference between the living entity and the Supreme Personality of Godhead is that the living entity is prone to be subjected to material nature, whereas the Supreme Godhead is always transcendental to material nature as well as to the living entities. When the living entity is put into the material nature, then his senses and qualities are polluted or designated. I mean, he becomes attached to things in the material world. There is no possibility for the Supreme Lord to become embodied by material qualities or material sense, for he is above the influence of material nature and cannot possibly put in the darkness of ignorance like the living entities. Because of his full knowledge, he is never subjected to the influence of material nature. Material nature is always under his control, and it is therefore not possible that material nature can control the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Okay, so that's our problem. We become attached to material nature and material things. And because of that, we lose our interest in Krishna consciousness and merrily go on our way to sense gratification. And then when we die, we have to take birth again. And we get stuck in the cycle of birth, death, old age, and disease. It's only when we lose our attraction to the material world and take seriously to Krishna consciousness that we're able to liberate ourselves from this cycle of birth and death. But always, just like there's always new cell phones, always new cars, always new this, always new that. And people get attracted to these things. And because there's like a new house and a new car and new this and new that, and they become attached, uh, or even in another way, they're attached because things are very old, and they want to preserve them, as much as they can. Or they become very attached to the body, even though the body is deteriorating. They still remain very, very much attached. And this is why the Hindus, they burn the body so that the soul does not linger around like a ghost and say, there was once a man, he went to a cemetery and to pay the respect to a person that he knew who was dead. So he goes to the cemetery, lays some flowers on the tomb of his friend, and it was getting to be dark, so he didn't want to stay in the cemetery when it was dark. So some people think, at dark, when it's dark, the dead people, they come out of their womb, out of their uh, out of the ground, start walking around, in places haunted by ghosts and so forth. So he started walking real quickly to get out of the cemetery, and he had a cloak on, this long coat, it was very long, and it was touching the ground as he was walking, and it got stuck on some kind of a thorn, and he fainted out of fear because he thought, some ghost had grabbed him and not letting him get out of the cemetery. He got scared like anything. Uh, so here we see, people think, well, don't go to the cemetery at night because the ghosts come out. It might be true. I don't know, but uh, we need to rather understand that there are ghosts. Prabhupada also said there are ghosts, and they are suffering because they don't have a body that they can use for sense gratification. They have a subtle body, but the subtle body can't enjoy sense gratification. They have to have a gross body. So their only hope is to find someone who is doesn't bathe regularly, and doesn't cut the fingernails, doesn't get haircuts, doesn't brush their teeth and so forth. Has very bad hygiene, and a person who is basically living in the mode of ignorance all the time. So people like that, they're close to death, and therefore the ghost tries to find someone like that, and the ghost enters into the mouth of the person. So oftentimes you'll see people are sleeping and then some saliva comes out of their mouth that smells really bad. And then when they wake up, then they rub their mouth and they smell it and they say, "Oh my God, what is this?" Uh, that means that the ghost entered their body. That's why it smells so bad. Uh, so the only way you can de-ghost yourself is to, first of all, correct your hygiene and bathe, you know, at least twice a day or 3 times a day, and chant Hare Krishna, and always have clean clothes, keep everything in your house, clean, and chant Hare Krishna. But ghosts, they like to, they have to seize the body of a living entity, of a human being, and the who is uh, living in such a way that they're self-destructive. So those type of people usually don't bathe regularly, and their hygiene is very bad, and they eat horrible things like meat and so forth. and they basically are not maintaining any hygiene. And then the ghost, while they're sleeping, they open their mouth a little bit while they're sleeping, and the ghost enters into their body. And how do we know the ghost has entered into their body? Because the saliva of the person, wets the mouth, comes out of the mouth while they're sleeping. And then when they wake up, when they touch it, it smells really bad. That means that the ghost entered their body. And now they're in big trouble. Okay. Now, there are some people that, claim to be de-ghosters, You go to them and they do things to help you, get free of the ghost. And they do all kinds of different strange things. And sometimes you can read in the paper, that one family thinks one of their children is, seized by a ghost. So they go to a person who can de-ghost the child, and then that person does all these strange things, and the child dies, or the child goes crazy. So these things happen, and it's unfortunate. It happens also in, let's say, more primitive people, like people living in Africa or other places like that have these ghost ceremonies. They think that somebody's seized by a ghost in their community, so they try and take the child or the adult to a de-ghoster, and the de-ghoster does all these crazy things. Sometimes these people will die, or basically are killed. Well, okay. So why don't you look up in dictionary? I'm not dictionary. Uh, the internet. Uh, de-ghosters. Look up de-ghosters. Okay. So yes.
So, Maharaj, what is the solution for those people, because they are suffering clearly because of the ghost problem, and and people will look for a solution, and these ghosters will come, and some may be genuine, some may be cheaters. So what is the solution for those people? Like how they can
Well, one time
come out from such
Prabhupada,
situation?
when he was still married, he wanted to buy a house, and there was a house that was pretty cheap, and but nobody wanted to buy the house because everyone was convinced that there was a ghost in that house. So Prabhupada took the initiative to try and, I think he actually bought the house, and he de-ghosted it. He sat down in a chair, and just started chanting, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare. And eventually the ghost just left. And he got a house for cheap, very cheap. Nobody wanted to buy that house. Yeah. And there are places like that. Like when one time we bought this temple or building for a temple, and the first night, and people was, were saying there were ghosts in this temple. So the first night I was sleeping there, and in the middle of the night, I felt as if there was someone sitting on my head, and my breathing, I could hardly breathe. And then I realized it was a ghost, you know? And I just started chanting. I tried to chant, and the beginning was difficult, but I just started chanting, and eventually, and gradually it went away. because that building that we purchased had ghosts in it. Now the ghosts, they basically went up to the rooms in the higher parts of the building, and we just stayed away from that part of the house uh, for some time, but we just kept chanting Hare Krishna. Eventually, ghosts went away, but there are such a thing as ghosts. That's unfortunate, but there are. And ghosts are people who usually commit suicide. And because they do such a horrible thing. See, a person who's, let's say, suffering a lot, they want to die, thinking that if I die, then I won't suffer anymore. But so they commit suicide, and now they can legally commit suicide nowadays. They don't kill you, like hit you over the head or something, but they put you in a doctor's office or something, and they let you uh, kill yourself by getting an injection of something or somehow or other. I don't know exactly what they do. So that doesn't solve the problem. It makes it worse because now you become a ghost because you committed suicide, and and you still have the same material desires as when you had a full body, but you don't have a physical body anymore. Yet you have the ghost body, and therefore you suffer even more than before. They think, well, if I die, then I won't exist anymore, and I won't have any suffering. But no, you can't kill the soul. So we see that there's a lot of ignorance in this world, and there are a lot of strange people that do de-ghosting, and sometimes they'll kill a person that they're trying to de-ghost by the different things that they do in this de-ghosting ceremony. It was very horrible, and it's not only people in Africa, although you might think, well, they're so savage, they do these things. No, you have this all over the world. People think that they can, de-ghost you. So there's this one Jewish person who was something of a devotee. He was coming all the time to the temple, but he also claimed to be a de-ghoster. So he had a table and a place that he rented, and people would come to him and he'd do different things to de-ghost them. So one day, some lady came who looked really strange, all dressed all in black, and he told me what happened, and then she was looking at him very strangely, and all of a sudden, that he was sitting on one side of the table, and she was sitting just opposite to him, and all of a sudden, the table started to move, and he was like surprised, and it was going, I guess it was going up and down, or this side, that side. And the lady was smiling. And then he realized, oh my God. I mean, he was a de-ghoster, right? But the person that came, this lady that came, was a ghost. She was a very, very freaky person. And he got scared, and he left right away. He got scared, and then he gave up trying to be the ghoster because the lady scared him so much. So you see, there's a lot of funny things happen in life. Okay, so so this text 14. Did we finish that? I think so.
We're halfway through.
Halfway through. Okay, the difference between the living entity and the Supreme Personality of God is that the living entity is prone to be subjected to material nature. See, that's a very interesting phrase. Prone to be subjected to material nature. So there's some attraction of the material nature that they're attracted to. Whereas the Supreme Godhead is always transcendental to material nature as well as to the living entities. The living entities are prone to be subjected to material nature because they're attracted to things in the material world, new cell phones and new cars and new houses and new this and new that. And it says here that the difference between the living entity and its Supreme Personality Godhead is that the living entity is prone to be subjected to material nature, whereas the Supreme Godhead is always transcendental to material nature as well as to the living entities. When the living entity is put into material nature, then his senses and qualities are polluted or designated. Okay, so designated means, I am an LGBTQ something, they identify like that. So that's the false designation. Of course, they would say, no, that's who I really am. But they're falsely designating themselves. There is no, or someone can say, no, but I am I am a member of the Ku Klux Klan, so they identify themselves like that. So these are false designations. There is no possibility for the Supreme Lord to become embodied by material qualities or material senses, for he is above the influence of material nature and cannot possibly be put in the darkness of ignorance like the living entities. Because of his full knowledge, he is never subjected to the influence of material nature. Material nature is always under his control, and it is therefore not possible that material nature can control the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Well, it is possible that we can also become, let's say, lose our attraction to the material world and not be fooled by it anymore. Because everything in the material world is more or less illusory. Now, why is it illusory? Well, because it's not sat, it's not eternal. So at a certain point, it's going to disappear. And all we have left is memories of things. And it's bewildering. Let's say you're in a family and it's a big family, there's uncles and aunties and mother and father and grandfather and grandmother. And all of a sudden, one by one, they start dying. They get old and they start dying, or they have accidents and things. And eventually, that's it. They're all dead. All the relatives are dead. All you have is some memory of the relatives. Or you go to the cemetery where they have their graves, and you put flowers on it, So the grandfather and grandmother died, then the father and the mother died, and then the uncles and the aunties died, and then the boy or the woman, the man and woman or woman. Now there's no more relatives. They all died, and you just have memories. That's it. So it's a little bit confusing and then also that means that you're going to die too. Right? So it's a little bit confusing. Actually, if you develop Krishna consciousness, you don't get confused by it because you understand that the soul is eternal. It's never going to die, and it's only the body that dies. But see, not everybody believes that, and therefore they suffer because unnecessarily because they're living in the past. They're not living in the present. They're remembering all the things they did before when there was uncles and aunties and cousins and parents and grandparents and so forth. And now they're all dead. So then you realize, wait a minute, there's so many illusory things in the material world. The idea that the family is eternal. It's not eternal. And actually, we've had many families. So we think, oh no, I'm a member of this family. But in previous lives, there were many different families that we're in, and they were not all human. There were and it could be animals and all kinds of different species that we had to go through. So we had many different fathers and mothers, and some of them are human beings, and some of them are animals or whatever. So it's very, let's say, confusing when you realize that the body is always changing. The soul is always there, but the body is always, the soul never changes, but the body is always changing. And if we identify with the body, we're complete ignorance and illusion. But if we identify ourselves as the eternal servants of Krishna and engage in that type of activity, eventually we'll be liberated from this whole cycle of birth, death, old age, and disease. But if we continually stay attached to things in the world and sense gratification, then there's no way of getting out of this predicament, this entanglement, and there's repeated birth and death. So it all depends on what we're attracted to. So some people are attracted to, doing things like, eating meat and gambling and so forth. And other people are attracted to Krishna. So the attraction to Krishna will liberate us, and attraction to all these other things, cars and gambling and illicit sex and so forth, will keep us in the material world. And there's no guarantee what body we'll have in the material world. Okay. So we're on text 15.
The last paragraph of
14. The entire process of devotional service is to purify oneself of this contamination of material nature and put oneself on the spiritual platform where he is qualitatively one with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Now, that's not Mayavad philosophy. It means, and Mayavadis think that they can become qualitatively and quantitatively one. But one can never become quantitatively one with the Lord, but we can become qualitatively one. In other words, we can surrender ourselves to the Supreme Personality of Godhead and engage in pastimes with the Lord, and even have a body that's very similar, to the Lord. But we're always going to be subordinate. Okay, so the entire process of devotional service is to purify oneself of this contamination of material nature and put oneself on the spiritual platform where he is qualitatively one with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So what does that mean, qualitatively one with the Supreme Personality of Godhead? That means that the living entity now follows the principles of Krishna consciousness. So they come up to the level of the Lord. They become gradually free from the illusory things such as sex and meat eating and gambling and all those things. And they're always engaged in offering, service to Krishna. So then you become qualitatively one with the Lord. You don't become the Lord, but you act on the level of Krishna consciousness, which puts you on the level of the Lord. and that means that you have you're associating with the Lord. See, so it's like let's say you're just an ordinary person, but somehow or other you make friends with a very rich man, and that rich man likes you, and he invites you to his house and things like that. So now it looks like you're coming to the same level as the rich man, but you're able to, be invited to parties in the rich man's house, or you're able to, go on trips with the rich person and so forth. So it looks like you are on the same level. So the same way, the living entity can come onto the same level as the Supreme Personality Godhead by process of purification and Krishna consciousness, but we're always going to be subordinate to the Lord. But we can live on the same, let's say, level as the Lord, where we engage in devotional service always. So that means that we're serving the Lord. We're not serving our senses anymore. So you come on the same level as the Lord, the transcendental level. Okay, so the entire process of devotional service is to purify oneself from this contamination of material nature and put oneself on the spiritual platform where he is qualitatively one with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In the Vedas, it is said that the living entity is always free. Asango hi ayam purusha. The living entity is liberated. His material contamination is temporary, and his actual position is that he is liberated. This liberation is achieved by Krishna consciousness, which begins from the point of surrender. Therefore, it is said here, I offer my respectful obeisances unto the Supreme Person. So, how do you surrender? Well, you give up all bad uh, qualities and practices, and you take up Krishna consciousness seriously. So now you are elevated to the same platform as the Lord, where there's no more sinful activities. You never become the Lord, but you can live on the platform or of the Lord, and eventually you're liberated from the cycle of birth and death. But even then, you're still not equal to the Lord, but you're always the eternal servant of the Lord. So if you are a servant of the Lord, that means you're on the same level as the Lord. Okay? Just like there was one man, well, he was a boy at one time, and he was very poor. So there was one grocer, and the boy was went up to the grocer and said, "Sir, I want to serve you for free." And the grocer said, "Really?" He said, "Yes. You tell me whatever you want me to do. I'll work for free." And so he gave him a broom and said, "Okay, you start sweeping the store." So he did, and that went on for a couple of days. And then the man said, "Where do you sleep at night?" The boy said, "Well, there's this little park somewhere near here. I go to sleep there." And said, "Well, why don't you sleep in my in the back of the store?" And the boy said, "Oh, okay." I said, and how do you eat?" He said, "Well, I eat out of garbage cans." Okay, so I'll let you eat, you know, things from the store. So now the boy's situation improved, because before he was, eating from the garbage can and sleeping in the park. Now, he had a place to sleep and also bathe, and he was able to eat decent food, and he worked hard. He worked very hard, and but he saw that the grocer would go once a month and pay taxes to the governor. So the boy was thinking, he, in before he was thinking, oh, the grocer is really at the top of the human achievement. But then he realized there was someone greater than the grocer. So after some years of very faithful serving, he asked the grocer, he said, can you introduce me to the governor and give me a good recommendation so I can serve the governor? And the grocer said, well, I'll do that because you've been a faithful servant. So now he was serving the governor. So his position came even better because he's living in the palace of the governor, eating the food of the governor and getting clothes, uh, on the level of the governor. And so that went on for some time. And then he saw that the governor, every once in a while, would leave the palace and go out into the forest. And he decided to, he would go out away and then he'd come back after a couple of days. So the boy followed him, and the governor, went into the forest, and there was an ashram of devotees. And he sat down with the devotees and was chanting Hare Krishna and bowing down to them. And then the boy realized, oh my God, there's someone greater than the governor. So he thought, if I could join these people, then I'd be with the best people. So he joins the group of devotees and he becomes a devotee. Okay? So he went gradually from one step to another step to another step, and finally comes and becomes a devotee himself. So this is what people do in life. They're always seeking the association of people who they think are very successful. But the most successful people are devotees, although they might be living in the forest and an ashram and having very simple lifestyle and chanting always Hare Krishna. But then, this boy realized that, the relationship with the devotees is the most important relationship because they're coming closer and closer to Krishna. Okay, so text number 15. The human soul further prays. So this is, the whole process of birth, how it happens.
You have to just time check, right?
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Because it's a long.
Okay. So any questions? Oh, let's just read this verse.
Yeah.
The human soul further prays. The living entity is put under the influence of material nature and continues a hard struggle for existence on the path of repeated birth and death. This conditional life is due to his forgetfulness of his relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, without the Lord's mercy, how can he again engage in the transcendental loving service of the Lord? Yeah, this hard struggle for existence on the path of repeated birth and death, that is almost everybody. This hard struggle for existence on the path of repeated birth and death. And this is due to forgetfulness of one's relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So, without the mercy of Krishna, how can anyone be engaged in transcendental loving service to the Lord? So we should always be seeking the mercy of the Lord. And that's not by ignoring the Lord, but it's like proactively associating with devotees and going regularly to the temple and bowing down to the deities of the Lord and hearing lectures by devotees and so forth. We have to make a concerted effort to associate with Krishna and his devotees. We don't make any spiritual advancement by, going to movies and associating with people that eat meat, gamble, and all that, all the so-called good things in life. they're not good things. They're actually very bad. But some people become addicted. Like, for example, let's say you're in high school and a friend of yours says, "Hey, you want to join our group?" And you say, "Yeah, yeah." And so uh, now he's joined this group of boys and girls, and but they smoke marijuana. So they say, "Well, but to join our group, you got to smoke marijuana with us." So he said, "Okay, I'll do that too," just so he can join the group. So that then he becomes a groupie, smoking marijuana with everyone else and all the other, bad things that they do. So that's the effect of associating with people who break the regulative principles. So someone might say, well, look, I follow three. I don't follow four things, but I follow three of the regulative principles. But that's not good enough. We have to follow all the regulative principles. So there's all different types of people with different types of theories, but we have to come to the highest, let's say, practice of Krishna consciousness by following all the regulative principles. Sometimes people say, well, I only follow three. And one time uh, when I was just a new devotee and I joined the temple, and uh, we would, stand in line to take a cold shower early in the morning before Mangal Arati. And but as soon as, because there was a long line, as soon as you got into the shower, immediately they were knocking on the door. Hurry up. uh, uh, and at one point, I told the temple president, I don't think I can become a devotee. He said, really? Why not? I said, well, so what they would do is, there was only one bathroom, right, and one shower, and there's a whole bunch of devotees. So uh, as soon as you go into, let's say, the toilet, immediately, somebody, hurry up, it's Mangal Arati is soon. So, and if you can't, and I was also told that you should only pass stool once a day in the morning. That means, if you want to be if you're a bogey, you pass stool any time of the day. But if you're a real, devotee, you only pass stool once a day, and that's, in the early morning. Yeah. So I thought, okay, that's the rule. You can only pass stool early in the morning. But whenever you get into the toilet, people will start knocking, on the toilet. So hurry up, because Mangal Arati is real soon. So I started missing the ability to go to the toilet. And the rest of the day we're so busy, there's no time to go to the toilet. So then I went to the temple president. I said, Prabhu, I said, I don't think I can do this. He said, why not? So I said, I don't think I can be Krishna conscious. I said, why not? I said, because uh, I can't follow this rule. You can only pass stool early in the morning. Before Mangal Arati. He said, who told you that? I said, but that's what everyone's doing. He said, no, 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 that's nonsense. Forget that. You can pass through anytime you want. So, you have these strange things that become, a rule. It's not really a rule, but, everyone says, if you pass stool during the day, you're not a real devotee. You can only do it, early in the morning and before Mangal Arati. And if you miss doing it, then you have to hold it in until the next morning. Yeah, there were a lot of funny things that happened in the early days of Krishna consciousness. Okay, so Are there any questions?
Maharaj, even now also, if someone is doing some way, some other things, so
Yeah.
people start thinking, oh, this is also too.
Yes, yes.
So kind of little change to adopt unknown things because some devotees are following, or maybe a bigger group of devotees are following. Then it becomes like, oh, maybe this is right.
Well, you think, this is something, it's like a rule.
Yes. So this problem is still now as well, I feel like sometimes.
Well,
To,
that's
like,
why we have to have
protect our-
have association with more advanced devotees. Sometimes things become habit, and but it was speculated. It's not really something we should do. But you just think, well, everyone else is doing it, I'll have to do it also. Yeah, that's when I went to the temple president. I said, "Look, I don't think I can be Krishna conscious." He said, "Why?" I said, "I can't follow all the rules and regulations." I said, "Oh, is it illicit sex?" I said, "No." He said, "Is it meat eating?" I said, "No." Is it gambling? I said, "No." Is it
That's
intoxication? I said, "No." I said, "Then what is it?" I said, "It's the rule. You can only pass stool, early in the morning." I said, "I can't, and there's so many people in the temple, as soon as I go into the toilet, they start knocking on the door. Say, hurry up. And I get an anxiety and I can't do it. And then I can't pass through until the next morning. And so who said that? I said, well, some brahmachari told me that. So there's all kinds of these funny things that happen when there are a lot of neophyte devotees. Haribol.
any other question, comments? Not, we'll see you in the evening.
Hare Krishna.
Hare
Thank you very much. All glories to Prabhupada.